President.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank our university's Board of Trustees for the intense scrutiny that they have given to this new and innovative way to fund University of Utah athletics. Individually, they spent a lot of time, and I hope you recognize that today in their deliberations they asked, I think, the difficult questions that should be asked of a Board of Trustees of a public institution. We are excited about this new innovation in University of Utah athletics. This will give our institution, particularly our athletic institution, the upside it needs to thrive in the new revenue sharing and NIL era. It also allows the other missions of our university to thrive. I mentioned in the meeting today, we are a unique asset to the state of Utah in that we not only teach students, we do the bulk of the federally funded research in the state, and we are also a healthcare system. Each of those missions for us to be successful have to be successful as well. And in the old model of funding athletics, often those missions were placed at odds with each other. This new innovation, this new way of doing business, actually allows them to complement each other in ways that we have never seen before. And we are excited to start executing on this new vision.
Well, I want to add my thanks to the Board of Trustees, incredibly thoughtful group, challenges me in all the right ways. But I also want to add my thanks to this gentleman on my left. You know, it's when you have a president who leads like Taylor does, with compassion, with vision, and someone who expresses his absolute desire for us to be bold in our units, something like this is the outcome. And we've seen it all across the university time and time again in your 5 years, and just very grateful for your leadership. I'm not surprised. We perhaps are the first in this, and it has everything to do with this gentleman on my left who does have a fascination with chaos. And when we talk about chaos, we talk about, well, how can we jump ahead in chaos? And I've always thought that in the back of my mind, it's a powerful thing for him to say. You know, it's an awesome, challenging time in intercollegiate athletics in our industry, and it's one that there are times I think to myself, is this what we all signed up for? And you know, you can have your moments like that, or you can and stay in those moments, or you can just get moving. And I think when I think of 500 student athletes that are under our care on a daily basis, and it's 360 plus days a year, I think about how can we be greatest for them as a leadership team in the athletic department, as a university as a whole, for their experience. And I think when this opportunity started to make sense and it came to us, you know, first reactions were not interested. It was something that I'm so proud of, the fact that we have raised a lot of money through great donors and supporters. But I realized in this time, if you dismiss something, you're not a leader. You're just simply managing, and that's not what Taylor encourages us to do. And so as we began the journey, and really Taylor surrounded us with an incredible team, many are in this room, to examine this in every way possible. And I'm telling you, we have examined this in all ways possible. And where we ended up is a place that I could have only dreamed of a year and a half ago. We are going to now join with an incredible group of professionals who have deep experience in solving riddles, particularly in the sports field, and how you treat the customer that come to these activities in a very world-class environment. They've been involved in European teams. They've been involved in American teams. They've been involved in just about everything you can imagine, and you blend that with the leadership that we currently have. It's a pretty exciting thing. You can imagine why I'm very excited that we're going to be able to now really work with them and solve these riddles together. I also want to take a minute to compliment my staff of people that are in the external relations team that probably are, you know, have some butterflies in their stomach right now, right? Because unfortunately, process would suggest that we're not allowed to work with a lot of people. So it'll be a great day of conversation with them about how they can be great in this process, along with our donors, along with our ticket holders, to explain the move that we made today. And so very excited for the future of Utah athletics, probably never more excited than anything I've been involved with in my career, quite candidly, and really look forward to what the future holds. At the end of the day, it's always about, you know, winning in the classroom, right, which is always something that I we evaluate myself, we evaluate our coaches. It's about winning in the community. I think that that's really important, that our student athletes and coaches are at the very highest level, and we win in the classroom. And you know, competition, community, and classroom, I should say. And competition, you know, I think this is another step forward to retaining the best that we have, recruiting the best that we have, and continuing to march forward. Last thing I'll say, NIL. I think this is extreme boost to NIL. We're bringing in folks that have been involved with NIL in the professional space for years. I've been real proud of our efforts and how we've handled NIL, the opportunities that our students have had. You don't retain the kind of players that we've had in many sports if we don't have a very robust program. But this allows us to now really, in our recruiting process, in our retainment process, to really show what we are now surrounding our student athletes with going forward. So I do want to mention specifically, I'm very excited about what this will do with appropriate and authentic NIL going forward.
Okay. Yeah. Name and organization.
Josh Harlan, KSL.com. Mark, you guys talked about how Olympic sports and women's sports are obviously really important as part of this deal for you guys. But as part of this, with Utah football being kind of the biggest brand and the money maker of the university, do you have, you know, ballpark figures of how much you would like to allocate towards NIL, what that number looks like in terms of how you're going to attract athletes that way?
Well, I've been on record before. We are allocating to the max allowable under the settlement that does not change in this deal announced today. Nor are we allowed to promise anything above that. That is actually a rule that's in place that I do hope more compliance comes to. I want to add that editorial because I think that's really important. I'm not here to do anything but abide by the rules and maximize the opportunities that we have. Integrity is very important to not only me but this university. So I want to make that very clear. What I want to say when it comes to name, image, and likeness is as having the best platform for these athletes that have worked on their brand through their hard work are going to have the very best opportunities to work with pros that have been doing this forever to enhance that brand and to include them in the deals that were out in the marketplace. That is now legal. So we can do all of the things that have changed and to be able to maximize those opportunities.
Jason Detective from the Salt Lake Tribune. Mark and Taylor, you know, you guys mentioned that you've gone through a process of just assessing the risk, but I'm just curious from both of your perspectives, how risky is this move just given it is private equity? And you know, what is, I guess, the off-ramp scenario, say if you guys don't meet revenue, or, you know, there becomes a scenario where you don't meet the financial goals that, say, Altro wants or you guys want with this separate LLC entity?
Look, first and foremost, we weren't interested in pure capital. We were interested in a partner, right? So when you sit down and you're trying to find a partner, that's a very, very different process than just trying to find money. Because right now there are millions upon millions of dollars flooding into athletics for dollars. So this is predicated on a set of individuals that are aligned with our values and aligned with our incentives. So in terms of risk, right, they're the ones that are taking risk with us. And I think we both feel an obligation to make this venture successful, and we both want the same thing. So I think that's what you're going to see us focused on the next 3 years is just getting this venture off in an extraordinarily successful trajectory.
Dennis Romwood, Deseret News. How much money do you expect Otro or any of the investors to ultimately put into this entity? And is the $500 million figure that Yahoo Sports reported earlier this morning accurate?
Yeah, we're not going to comment on figures, mainly because, you know, we still have some negotiating to do and are going to close this deal sometime in the first part of 2026. But what I will stand true to is this is a platform that will allow multiple millions, right, to come into the athletic program at various points in time. Right now we need an infusion. We may need an infusion just before the Olympics. We may need infusions at other points. What I think we've learned through this process is the traditional ability to bring capital to athletics is going to be extraordinarily strained. And so we're going to use this over and over again to fund excellence in athletics.
Sammy Moore at UTSUN.com, 24/7 Sports. How long was the whole deliberation process for this whole thing? Because Mark, you said that when you were first approached, the answer was no. So how long did this process?
I don't even think I gave him a no. I don't know if I returned the call.
How long did the process take from like this first call to now?
Yeah, I would say it's been over a calendar year for sure. And then you got to go back further to just, I'm always trying to be a studier of what's going on. And certainly over the last few years, as was mentioned in the trustee meeting, there's been a lot of capital coming into pro sports. And so I figured by eventuality it would probably enter our space, but especially after the settlement, and the true paying of from athletic department to athlete was going to occur. So you got to put that in there too. And then once we, again, I very clear that I was not interested, nor was the president interested in just here's capital. I mean, we're a public university. We probably could go out and get a pretty decent loan, right? But I think we both felt that's just kicking the can of debt down the line to future folks that are running things. And we just want to get better too, and with the great staff and combining with, Jeff Labram's auxiliary teams that runs a lot of the events and just working all together. And so once we found Otro, then that began the process before it got turned over to the lawyers. Before we got there, it was more about just cultural fit, operational fit. I wanted to make sure that when we talked about a fan, did our definition align? As simple form as that. Experience, did it align? And then really studying them, and as mentioned earlier, other folks that maybe had worked with them. So there was a long journey in there that was definitely over a 12-month period.
And I would simply add a vetting of multiple and many firms, right? Which culminated, I think, in the focus of the trustees in June of 2025 saying, okay, you've narrowed things down a bit. Let's get, they allowed the foundation to go start fleshing out details at that point.
As part of this, as you guys are infusing cash and also trying to find new opportunities to continue to kind of sustain that, is there any is there any conversations to potentially have alcohol sales in stadiums or any of that stuff? Is that part of that conversation, or is that still kind of not something the university wants to take part in?
We do have a license for non-university events, so that occurs already. That is more a matter of state regulation and state law.
John Leone with the Daily Utah Chronicle. I'm curious how this deal will impact, if at all, season ticket prices and just single game prices, concessions, things like that.
Yeah, I'll take that. I think what is true before today and will remain true afterwards is that whenever I have and my team has examined season tickets, single game pricing, it is a intense process. And certainly over the last few years, a lot of data-driven variable pricing, all of the new technology that is used. I mean, we've got everything you can imagine. Not only who bought the tickets, that's pretty easy, but who came, what time they showed up to games. I'm not telling you we're watching everybody, folks that aren't showing up to basketball games, but we know who you are. Yeah, we love them all. So that's always been a very analytical approach, and certainly since my arrival, we don't run from it. We've raised prices. We've got an incredible program in the football in terms of all their success, and so that analytical approach will always be there. I've specifically spoken to this group. It's something that I wanted to understand. I studied what they did at the Cowboys and what they've done at the Browns is to back up some of the things, and within all that analytics, right? Coming off the committee, I want to say this thing, or CFP committee. Within all that data and all that committee comes common sense. And I think we have to be very cognizant of the different fan base that we have in the different sections and be very, very smart about it. But I don't want to act like season tickets aren't going to get raised. That happens in the industry. But how we do it is going to still continue to be monitored. And frankly, if you could even go further with the way the governance is set up, if I'm in a disagreement with the president of Utah Brands and Entertainment, I win the argument. But I think that's an extreme example of that, right? I think we'll be collaborative in our approach, and I look forward to working with him on that and many other things we're going to be looking at.
Mark, one thing I wanted to get on the record in here is in the board meeting you talked about what this means for athletic staff, university staff. What would stay? What might be into the new company? Just maybe hit that.
Yeah, I think what's important to note is we have some, as I've said, we have some terrific people in the athletic department, and we'll begin working on those positions that would need to transfer into this new element. And that's not new. We're seeing a lot of these new companies develop across athletics. I think we saw one even announced this morning. I can't remember what university it was, but we're seeing many, particularly in the Power 5, Power 4, create those. And so that dynamic of employees that are maybe working directly in the athletic department will begin the process of moving over, especially if they're in regards to revenue positions. And so we'll be working a lot on that. Certainly we've been thoughtful about that, but now we get to have the chance to have a talk with all the employees about that, and there'll be anxiousness on that, and I recognize that. Our culture is so important in the department, so we'll be having conversations in depth about my vision on this, and certainly look forward to having those conversations with some really good people who are A performers and are key to our success, and many of them will be pegged to move over.
One or two more?
You both mentioned at the Board of Trustees meeting that there's going to be guardrails in place in terms of decision makings, in terms of NIL, where the money goes, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm just curious, what do those guardrails look like, and how do you, I guess, ensure the student athlete experience? There's not a scenario where Outro takes over a majority and they control this, I guess, entity as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, in the organizational docs, we have veto rights on those types, a lot of those types of decisions. We get to decide who invests, right, in this entity. Mark, though, ought to speak directly to control of coaches and athletes.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think, first of all, from a high level, NCAA membership and certainly Big 12 membership requires certain things. Requires a lot, but one of them that's very clear is that the Board of Trustees of those universities, with the president and athletic director, are running the athletic programs, right? So that kind of answers your question about ever an entity owning more than that. So that won't ever happen. As far as the department, the critical operating rhythm of the department as it relates to the great coaching that will surround our student athletes, the recruiting of those student athletes, the retainment of those student athletes, and all our support services, which are the best in the country here. When we talk about the holistic experience of a student athlete in terms of medical, academic, when I say medical, mental, and overall physical help, our incredible academic support team just recently announced a 95% graduation rate. And I tell you, that is a tribute to everybody I've just mentioned, and the fact that we're in a transfer area and we're still able to be that high. So all of that, one could argue, is even going to have more focus, right? I'm not to suggest I'm not going to keep my eye on everything that we're talking about in the revenue, because it's a critical component, but it allows my team, especially my management leadership team, to really be focused on those things. And so I'm really excited about that piece going forward.
One more.
Alex Markham, unation.com. This is for both of you guys. Obviously, it's been talked about that this is pretty much the first of its kind. In that process, was there any kind of hesitancy or worry about being the first to the table on this, and what could go from there? And also, to add to that, I'm sure that, and you guys can probably elaborate on this, I'm sure that there's still built-in stuff to what's the word I'm looking for? Not like pin you guys into a corner on certain things.
Yeah. Look, the ethos of this university is one of innovation and entrepreneurship. We think this is part of the brand. It's just another example. By the way, the brand isn't determined by Mark or I. It is what the trustees are. It is what the community is. It is what the students are, right? I think, sure, there's always some fear of doing something new, but that's what this state is about. That is what this university is about. That is what an educational institution does. It's willing to try some new things. And I think you answered your own question. Of course, we have built in a ton of stopgaps here and there if some of our assumptions don't play out.
All right, thank you, everybody. That was the last question.